Hi everybody, welcome to 2 Off the First. It is April the 27th, 2023. I'm Ryan Ballingy. It's great to have you here with us. We have 125 days until I leave for my trip to Ireland. I'm so excited about that. Starting the countdown clock here, getting to Ireland to actually play some golf. As I mentioned, I went 11 years ago with my wife before we had children, and I finally get to go back and go play some golf this coming summer at the end of August, first week of September. Very excited about that. Also, another announcement, very excited to share that we will be wearing Swannies apparel on 2 Off the First in our video programming this year and for the next 12 months. I'm very excited to have worked that out with the gang at Swannies. I've known them since they first showed up at the PGA Merchandise Show, a little bit in clandestine fashion with a pair of golf flip-flops that they have made. We got together. I really enjoyed it. I really like talking to them. I love the hustle of what they were doing. And all these years later, we're here doing this at Golf News Net. They are thriving over at Swannies. They make some of the best apparel in the game. I really love what they do. And so wanted to support them and showcase their apparel on the show and in the video content that we do otherwise here at Golf News Net. So you'll start to see that as well. And then you'll see behind me here-ish in that range some logos of our friends of the show. So you'll include Swannies and Squares and other friends of the program that you'll see over the coming weeks and months. So background changed a little bit, but not too much. And if you're listening in the voice version, well, you got the gist of it. Just imagine some logos floating behind a bald head, and you'll get the gist of that. So a couple things to talk about today. First, we're going to talk about Phil Mickelson's comments that the major championships have to find a way to accommodate LIV players. I do want to talk about some changes to the PGA Tour's understructure, the developmental tours. Some pretty big news on that front. We'll talk about that. May not be big news to everybody that's a general golf fan, but it is a pretty sizable piece of news in terms of how players will qualify for the PGA Tour in the future and the funnel system or the umbrella system, depending on how you look at it, to get there. Let's start, though, with Mickelson's comments made at LIV Golf Singapore. They have moved from Adelaide, which was a fairly raucous-looking atmosphere, to Singapore, which is the complete and total opposite of that dictatorial city-state, and that dictatorial city-state doesn't like to have fun in quite the same way that they do in Adelaide, Australia. So big change in the vibe of the week, I suppose, which I think LIV had a win last week for that reason. I think the Adelaide event probably has been the one that most is emblematic of what they want to be, whether they are every week or not, but at least most emblematic of that. And then you get the complete opposite this week. Very strange. But anyhow, so in part of this news conference, Mickelson goes ahead and praises the dictator, and he's not the best, but does praise him for, I guess, because the country's clean or whatever. Doesn't matter. Let's get to the meat of the comments about the major championships. And basically the new talking point is the old talking point, that is the official world golf ranking is bad, and we need to get points, or the ranking system needs to change, or it's going to be rendered, in, I believe it was Bryson DeChambeau's words, obsolete. Of course, Bryson's not that much of an intellectual, so I'm not going to take his word for it. But Mickelson has this way of picking out, and has done this over the years, talking points where he comes up with an idea and then just sticks with it for a week. So there's a very good chance we're going to hear this multiple times over the course of the next 3-4 days, because they'll start their event tonight in the United States, but it starts Friday over there, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And Mickelson was talking about the major championships, and he really said it was, in quote, the best interest of everybody if LIV players can find a way into major championships moving forward. And he says, quote, it's going to all iron itself out, because if you're one of the majors, if you're the Masters, you're not looking at whether we should be keeping these guys out. You are saying to yourself, we want to have the best field, we want to have the best players, and these guys, meaning LIV guys, added a lot to the tournament this year at the Masters. How do we get them included? End quote. There were 18 LIV players in the Masters. Many of them made the cut, and several of them, I'll say 2 or 3 of them, were fortunate because Justin Thomas and Sungjae Im made that possible for not only Tiger Woods, but for them as well. And several of them competed well, right? You had 3 in the top 5. You had Brooks Koepka lead it for much of the way before falling off in a major again. You had Phil Mickelson with really nothing to lose in the final round, shoot his best ever final round of the Masters in, 30 years of playing the tournament, and tied his lowest ever round at Augusta National. Finished T2. It was remarkable longevity. Sees him as the oldest major champion and the oldest runner-up in a major championship. And then Patrick Reed finished out in top 5. That's a great run. I'm not saying that they didn't compete well. But what Phil is saying, I think, is his argument is that the players are very good, and therefore LIV should include players or have players included in the major championships. And he goes on about that and says, quote, they're going to have to find a way to get the best LIV players in their field if they want to have the best field in golf and be really what a major championship is all about. So they're already looking at that. If the World Golf Ranking doesn't find a way to be inclusive, then the majors will just find another way to include LIV because it's no longer a credible way. So it will all iron itself out for the simple reason that it's in the best interest of everybody, especially the tournaments, the majors, to have the best players, end quote. Now, this whole narrative of trying to make the official World Golf Ranking irrelevant has kind of taken itself on, but not in the way that Mickelson expected. Look at the PGA Championship, run by the PGA of America. They used to basically invite the top 100 in the official World Golf Ranking. They would fill out the field that way so that they knew they could have the deepest major championship field, if not the deepest field of the year in golf. That could always be a claim that the Players' Championship can make, but really the PGA Championship has that caliber of field because they go out of their way to invite the top 100. Well, that's changed. They have a PGA points list that determines basically the bulk of the field, and the top 70 players on that list get invited, and then once they fill out every other category, they fill it out with the rest of that list down to 156 players. Well, the only way you earn points on that list is through performance on the PGA Tour. So if you're not playing the PGA Tour, you're not getting invited to the PGA Championship. And it wasn't always an official OWGR criteria, which is kind of more of a courtesy. If you're in the top 100, we'd like for you to be there. We will invite you. Well, that changed. There have also been some other changes to criteria for other major championships. Taylor Gooch complained that he basically lost a spot in the U.S. Open because the USGA changed the criteria, as they do every year. They announce these changes. And they changed the criteria to make sure that you had to be eligible for the PGA Tour's Tour Championship. And so if you maybe would have qualified but were not eligible, then you didn't get into the Tour Championship, and therefore you don't get a spot into the U.S. Open. And Gooch has been upset with the changes to those different types of criteria, saying he was basically shut out of the U.S. Open because of that, and that they changed it retroactively, which was not true. So the criteria is already changed. It's already changing, and it's not in favor of LIV because they've just taken out of the equation some of the stuff that might have allowed them to get in based on where they currently stand in the OWGR. Now, we have talked about a little bit on this show the OWGR cliff that a number of LIV players are about to go over in the coming months because they will be subject to the minimum divisor, which means you have to have played 40 events, ranking events, in a rolling 2-year time span. Well, LIV doesn't have that kind of schedule. And also, the players not earning points will start to rack up because their points that they had will come off. So a lot of these players are going to drop precipitously in a very short period of time. And that is going to cause a bigger talking point for the LIV folks, and they're trying to resolve this here. They want to come up with, they've realized they've kind of lost the plot against the OWGR, and that by the time, even if they were to be given points, it's not going to matter to getting into majors, because since they only have the same 48 players, the OWGR ranking of the field would basically be the same every week. And you would have to assume, even if they were given points, that they would have a weakened number of points because they play one fewer round, and they have a limited field, have a shotgun start, and all of those things would come into account in terms of how the OWGR would rank these events. So these guys aren't going to just suddenly climb up bank up the rankings even if they got points. The only way they're going to do that is performance in the majors. And Mickelson, recognizing this, and probably several other players recognizing this, they need to find a way to get into the majors that has nothing to do with the OWGR, because that's how they're going to earn points, and then they can go and say, hey, we're in the top 50 in the world, a bunch of us are, how do you leave us out, instead of what the ranking system is effectively done, just kind of let them quietly fade into the background. And that's probably the general strategy of golf that is against LIV, has been, if we just wait it out long enough and we let the ratings prove that maybe people don't care, and we let the world ranking devalue these guys, and all of this stuff kind of goes away on its own instead of having to actively go after them. That kind of does the work for them without having to get too controversial and too public with it. I think that the LIV folks have realized, hey, the only way we're going to be able to do this is if we perform well in the majors and we command attention. But I also think people in golf, most people, I'm sure some, but most people didn't think, oh, because they signed with LIV, they're no good anymore. They've lost their talent like some kind of kryptonite. That's not the case. The issue has been that you're playing in a format that is not traditional, that we've all kind of recognized doesn't seem to generate maybe the best of the best results. Because it's not like all of a sudden we've gone to PGA Tour Champions events because Fred Couples and Bernhard Langer have contended in the Masters in the last decade. Well, maybe they should get some points. No, we haven't done that, and we're not going to do that. So why would that suddenly happen for this? I don't know how you do that effectively. And if anything else, I think, and we may have talked about this here, but the Masters is affirmed these guys can still play, and that's, I don't think, in dispute. But I think it is also affirmed that the LIV format creates very random outcomes, and it really doesn't do a good job of identifying champions necessarily, or at least the champions that they have identified. And I mean, Dustin Johnson's and Brooks Koepka's, and I'll even throw Taylor Gooch in there, very good player. Those guys are capable, obviously, but the other results, the distribution of results on LIV is quite random, and I don't think it lends itself necessarily to how people expect tournament golf to kind of work. And you could say to me, okay, well, it shouldn't work that way then. Fair, I suppose. But I don't see that as a reason for the OWGR to suddenly change their rules to a closed system that doesn't allow people to come and go as they please, and more particularly, doesn't allow people to come in. Because all the LIV guys want is to be able to play wherever they want, however they want. They go, oh, we're just all independent contractors. The counterpoint they often forget, though, there's no way in. And they omit that quite often. If there's no way in, then you can't come and go as you please if you play on the PGA Tour, for example. So I even if that weren't a suspension rendering thing, I think that's an important piece of all this. So all that to say, hey, we got some more talking points for LIV. Nothing's going to change. They know it's not going to change. So by knowing it's not going to change, they're going to try to change the subject and say, okay, well, put the top 3 or 5 or whatever. I mean, they would probably say top half, but top 3 or 5 players in LIV into major championship fields. And they might be able to garner that. But then that lends LIV credibility, and I don't think they're ready to do that yet. And as long as these lawsuits are going on, nothing's going to happen. Absolutely nothing is going to happen. So this is one of those things that might get a talking point week to week on occasion when Phil feels like he's being attacked or whatever. But that talking point is not going to mean a whole lot. Okay, let's talk about this change to the PGA Tour's developmental system. So if you're not familiar with it, I'll go over the kind of high level real quick. The PGA Tour owns or operates currently today 6 tours that I know of offhand. PGA Tour, right? That's the big guy tour. Directly underneath that is the Korn Ferry Tour, because that's the road to the PGA Tour. Over here, off to the side is the PGA Tour Champions. That's reserved for players who are 50 plus coming off the PGA Tour. Can still play the PGA Tour, but coming off of that latter stages of their golf career, they play that tour. 54 holes, no cuts, predominantly, all that good stuff. Under the Korn Ferry Tour, though, there have been 3 tours in recent memory. PGA Tour Series China, which has seemingly gone away forever, but it's still, I don't think, ever been given the official kill, but it's gone. And then PGA Tour Latino America, which is what happened when they took the Latin American Tour over. and brought it under the umbrella. And then PGA Tour Canada, which used to be the Canadian Tour, and they brought that under the umbrella. They used to call it the Mackenzie Tour, PGA Tour Canada, which was very convoluted. But nevertheless, they had basically 3 feeder tours into the Korn Ferry Tour. And based on your status, the top 5 players would get into the Korn Ferry Tour for the next year, have membership, and that's how you moved up the ranking system. Well, they're changing that. And starting in 2024, the 2 remaining tours out of the 3 feeder tours, PGA Tour Latino America and PGA Tour Canada, are going to merge into a single tour. And it will be called PGA Tour America. So the tour announced this earlier in the week. It's going to have 16 tournaments. There's going to be basically 2 stretches of season. The whole calendar will run February through September, and there will be tournaments in Latin America and Canada and the United States. And all told, there will be 15 Korn Ferry Tour cards that will be up for grabs, including for the top 10 finishers in their season-long points race. So here's how it's going to work. In 2024, there will be a Latin American swing, which is really how the Latin American Tour kind of works now. Not exactly, but kind of. And they take the Latin American swing, and that's going to run from February through May. It'll have 8 events, 144 player fields. And then they will go from there and have a North American swing of another 8 events that will start in June, mostly in Canada, some in the US. That'll end in September. Those fields will actually have 156 players. And that reason is more daylight. That's not necessarily because one's better than the other or what have you. And so the fields for the Latino America, the Latin America piece of this, will comprise of the top 60 from the points lists of PGA Tour Latino America and PGA Tour Canada. There'll be some other exemption criteria, Q School finishers, PGA Tour U grads, which offers some status on these tours based on how collegiate players finish in the rankings, exemptions, money qualifiers. Then you get to the second half of the year. The North American events will be from the top, filled largely from the top 60 finishers during the Latin American swing, the top 50 players from a PGA Tour America's Q School, which will basically happen in the middle of the year, and then there will be graduates of PGA Tour U who will be able to jump right into the North American portion of the schedule once they get out of school. 10 current Korn Ferry Tour members, so they may be struggling for status or not doing well. Monday qualifier sponsors, exemptions, top 10 finishers from the prior event, all those different types of things. So at the end of all of these events, the 2 8-event swings, 15 total Korn Ferry Tour cards will be available. So the top 2 in points after the first half of the season will get cards. The top 3 in points for the 8 events in North America will get cards. And the top 10 finishers from all the events combined, season-long PGA Tour America schedule, will get points. And the performance benefit really is a conditional Korn Ferry Tour card through the first 4 events on the schedule. It's not big reward, but it is something that could allow you to strike the iron while hot and maybe get yourself full status on the Korn Ferry Tour throughout multiple reshuffles, give you an opportunity to get into that top 30 somehow, get to the PGA Tour. The season-long cards, so for those 10 finishers, that will be exempt status through the first 2 reshuffles, so the first 8 events. So that gives you a whole lot more status, very similar to how they've done it in PGA Tour, what is now PGA Tour Q School again, but Korn Ferry Tour Q School, where if you got into the top level, you basically got through the first 2 reshuffles of the year. Unless you won, then you were exempt for the year. So that's kind of how they're going to reshuffle all of this together. And the key part of that is trying to take 2 disparate and sometimes competing tours and just make them into one thing. Because that way you have a full schedule, first of all, maybe a little bit easier to bring in sponsorship for both tours, kind of have a continuity piece of it. I'm sure they're probably looking for a title sponsor for the tour, the overall tour, that they will look for, just like the Korn Ferry Tour, and might even give them an opportunity to boost some of the purses a little bit, because they're kind of in the 150 to 200,000 range, which is like a ladies European Tour kind of purse, even a little bit lower than that actually. And so I think the hope here is that there will be bumped up purses overall for the the PGA Tour Americas segment. And I think that's the right thing to do here. Having the 3 tours, kind of like 5 from each, didn't work out very well. They weren't using 5 of them anyway because PGA Tour Series China had gone away with the pandemic and was already kind of iffy to begin with from a government supports perspective, depending on how the government felt about golf that day. So that was kind of already out. So you weren't using 5 of those. So you were denying 5 spots to the Korn Ferry Tour already. And then you had Latino America operating unto itself with a strange schedule that ended up in the fall and like a long break. And a lot of guys went between the 2 tours. So they figured just put it all together, have 2 separate swings, make them into 1 tour, keep it all centrally located for certain periods of time, which I think is the right idea, and then have it wrap up in North America, and then you award your cards based on performance at different parts of the year. I think that's the way to go. I think it's a good idea. It will have a fundamental change in perhaps how players choose to get to the PGA Tour, because I think there has been a lot of commotion about trying to go the Asian Tour route for some players who might otherwise try to get through the PGA Tour because the increased prize money on the Asian Tour, particularly in the international series events with the Saudi-backed influence and investment of having $2 million purses compared to $1 million on the Korn Ferry Tour, and obviously way more than what you'd be playing for on PGA Tour Latino America or the Canadian Tour this year. So I would expect to see some kind of investment there in terms of higher purse money and trying to find a way to find a title sponsorship to help get that money up to a higher level, even though, as we have all seen because of the increases to elevated events / designated events, the money is there. They could put $500,000 or $750,000 purses out there for the PGA Tour Americas events and not bat an eye, especially at 16 events. Put $300,000 into one. I mean, I know that's a lot of money to me and to you probably, but to the PGA Tour, that's next to nothing. I mean, that's an opposite field event's worth of money, basically, to get those up to a better standard. So hopefully they do that. But we will see what happens there. That's going to do it for us today on 2 Out the First. Thank you so much for watching or listening to the show. If you catch us as an audio podcast, leave a comment, give us a 5-star review, help us reach more people. If you're watching on YouTube, consider subscribing to the channel. Leave a comment, smash the like button. Really appreciate that. I'll get back to you with your comments or questions. And if you're watching or listening through some other fashion, including on GNN Radio and our TV apps for Roku and Amazon Fire, thanks for doing that. We appreciate that too. We will be back tomorrow with another show. It's my last show in my 30s, turning 40 on Sunday, and very excited to kind of celebrate 40 pretty decent years so far. See what the next 40 bring. God willing, that there's another 40. We'll talk to you tomorrow on 2 Out the First. Thanks so much for watching. We'll have a good one. See you tomorrow.